Well, hey, welcome to Kerncast and a valid answer on kerncast.com. Thank you for joining us. This is Scott and Marshall. We're a valid answer. We're a pastor and an atheist. Talk about, man, all the stuff in the world that really ticks us off, apparently. And in fact, we're going to make now we're going to be fine. I left some lights on that I shouldn't have left on, but we're going to look fine. I was going to have Josh go turn off some lights, but technical things, I'm not, I produce events, basically. I produce church at our church, so I'm always looking at, is it the right lights? Is it this? Because somebody has to do that, so nobody else has to think about it. You don't want the pastor to be thinking. You don't want the speaking pastor to be thinking about all those things. That's my job to do for them. But yeah, so my mind is always locked in on that, and I have a tendency. So I did get somebody had to talk to me this week about my intensity. It's kind of funny that this is because if you saw any interaction between Marshall and I on Facebook, I kind of got a little bit upset at something that he said on Facebook, and even to the point where I noticed he was a little quieter today. I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "I'm kind of afraid of what you're going to do because it seemed like I really pissed you off." And I'm like, "Okay, I can see that." And somebody did have to talk with me today, saying, not today, but they talked with me this week, saying that, Scott, you have a tendency to get locked in on certain things and you kind of bulldoze over the people that are around you because you're locked in like a bulldog on something, so these are my failings, right? I know what my failings are, and I apologize for going off on you, and I don't ever want you to think that I'm going to have a personal issue when you come in here with you, and even I got caught up in the typing to a person on the internet and not necessarily talking to you. So, but on that discussion, it did fire me up because I have a tendency to kind of just dig into what is the root of the matter. I'm a troubleshooter. That's what makes me really good at production, is that something's not right. What is it? Find it. This is the source. So many people get caught up on the symptoms and get caught up on this and look at that. And I'm like, nope, not that. So I have a tendency when I see a meme or a thing come up, and I look and say, the real problem is this. This is the real problem, and that sometimes that problem can really get to me. So I see what I feel is the root of the issue, and I want to just go after the root. All right, well, let's just deal with that, and that's going to let's discuss that, not necessarily all this other fluff, but let's discuss that. So tell everybody the meme you post and what sparked all this.
Tell everybody what you did.
Tell everybody what I did.
Okay, so I posted a meme, and it was just a rich guy with a Lamborghini, and he was leaning up the Lamborghini, and the caption on the meme says, "My boss told me that if we work really hard and really push ourselves to excel, he can buy another one just like it next year." In other words, so that hit close to home to me, because one of the problems that I see in the world today, and I think this is actually one of the most pressing issues in the world today, is wealth inequality, income inequality, that the people at the top are capturing well over 80%
Josh
of
says hi.
the
Hi,
world's
Josh.
wealth. Hi, Josh. Good to see you. Thank you for
Sorry.
tuning in. The people at the top are hoovering up a lot of the world's wealth. In fact, I had a stat here, and then I closed it to pull up. According to the House of Commons, a report delivered to the House of Commons, by 2030, the richest 1% will own 2/3 of global wealth. And so this is the defining issue of our age. And
But what is the richest 1%?
I don't understand your question. The people at the top who control...
Right, but...
There's like 8 people who control 50% of the world's wealth today.
Okay. But what's the 1%?
Well, that would be the people, generally at the top. Now, I don't know what the dividing line is, so let's look that up, right?
Okay. So when he posted that meme, I kind of reacted to it because the idea, I went back because here's the thing. I know, and it turns out Josh Gunderson knows the same guy. I know a guy who started his own business and ultimately sold that business for millions of dollars and bought himself a Lamborghini. He let me drive that Lamborghini at one point with my dad as well. And it was like, okay, and I know the story behind that. And it's like the real caption from that boss would be not, because you keep getting stuck on this. If you just work harder, That's not what people are saying. It's not how hard you work. It's the risk you take, the sacrifice you make, the decisions and the wise choices that you make. And the real response from the boss should be, if you take the risks I took, if you make the sacrifices I made years ago, if you make the decisions, the wise decisions, and spend the time and the research that I spent to build this business, to make this, if you did those things, then one day you too can have a Lamborghini. Mm-hmm. That's the real answer, because that's how the person I know, that's how he got his Lamborghini. Mm-hmm. It wasn't inherited. His family wasn't rich. It wasn't passed down. It was business decisions, high risk, took a risk, did these things, got lucky. Yes, luck has a lot to do with it, but luck doesn't help you if you're not already taking the steps. Mm-hmm. So a person who chose to make the steps, do these things, and got that, and that was that's how he got the Lamborghini. That's how he had it. And I felt that your meme demonized rich people for being rich. Like, there's no reason, hey, you just keep working for me and I'll just keep stealing your labor and I'll buy these things. And if you work harder, I'll get some more because I'm just going to steal your. No, not if you work harder. If you do the things that I did, you could have your own. But not all of us are willing to take those steps. Some of us, a lot of us may not be able, simply because of our personalities and our choices. I know that, and I don't mean to say this negatively even about myself. I know what I would need to do those things, but I don't believe it is in me to do it. But I know it is in me to do it. What I mean is, I don't know that I'm willing to make those risks. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I'm willing to make those sacrifices to do that. There are other things that I have in priority to do, that I have the talents and the abilities to be able to start making a lot of money. I know that I could. I know that I have the ability to do it, but what it would take to do that, the time it would take away from my family, not being able to work where I work, which is something that is dear to my heart, in being part of something bigger, being part of eternal decisions and people working for church. If I didn't work at a church, if I had the gumption to do what my talents are able to do, I know that I could be doing that. But I also know that I'm not willing to make those choices, that I am comfortable with the level that I live at. And it seems like, well, wow, you didn't reach for the stars, did you, Scott? And I'm like, well, maybe I didn't, but I'm good with where I'm at. Even though I know I could do more, I know it's possible, but I also know maybe it's not possible for me, not because nobody's holding me back, but because I know my own personality and I know what I'm not good at. And I know that I'm not necessarily good at being that entrepreneurial spirit that's just going to go get it.
Have you ever drove a Ferrari before?
Not a Ferrari, but drove a Lamborghini. Here's a funny thing. My dad owned 3 Porsches. Mm-hmm. They were all bought used. They were all at least 15 years, 20 years old at the time that we bought them. We rebuilt them ourselves and worked on them ourselves. Mm-hmm. No, never driven a Ferrari. Got a ride in an AC Cobra one time. That was fun.
How about like a Bugatti or anything? Or
Nah.
No? Well, there's his problem, right? But anyway,
what?
You need a taste of it. Then you'll be hungry for it.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I drove my friend's Lamborghini. Mm-hmm. It was the most amazing vehicle I'd ever been in, and was able to drive, and it was quite the experience.
So I want to answer that by explaining I don't have a problem with people having nice things.
Oh, that's right. Josh knew that I had that Porsche. Yeah.
With people, making money, people who take a risk should be compensated for that. Okay. There's value in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is, in economics, is defined as organizing land, labor, and capital to generate profits, surplus, if you will. And I don't have a problem with the people being entrepreneurs. In fact, you need entrepreneurship. Even in Soviet Russia, you need entrepreneurs to better organize land, labor, and capital in order to produce the things that society needs and demands and wants. Mm-hmm. However, the problem that I have is it feels to me like labor is grossly undercompensated in the status quo. Mm-hmm. whereas entrepreneurs and people whose only contribution is to own stuff are
No.
overly
That's where you mess.
compensated.
That's not what an entrepreneur does.
No, I understand. An entrepreneur is not
The
necessarily...
value of the entrepreneur is not that they own stuff. That's
No.
disingenuous.
I've not made that statement.
You just said that. You said where the value of the entrepreneur is to own stuff.
An entrepreneur is different from an owner. An entrepreneur is often also an owner, but you have many people who are owners who are not in any way entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to make make it clear that there is a distinction.
You,
So I'm
they would be
talking about,
investors, wouldn't they?
well, yes, you have people again whose only contribution to society is that they own things and they rent it out.
If they own it but they didn't entrepreneur it, then how did they get it?
It was probably passed along to them, or they invested to.
Okay, so maybe there is value to them that business wouldn't have existed unless they invested in it when it was a risk.
Right, or it was passed down to them.
Again, you keep going to this. It's all, no. How much is actually passed down? So I would say that more often it's because of investment than passed down.
Okay, the problem is still that the people in that top strata, the entrepreneurs, who I agree should be compensated, the owners, who I also agree should receive some compensation, but not nearly as much as they are capturing in the status quo. So my problem with the status quo is that the system is grossly imbalanced. It needs to be balanced, where workers are at least getting what they need to have a decent living. And that's not happening in the status quo. In the status quo, the owners and the entrepreneurs now hold so much wealth, they are able to convert that money into political power and into propaganda power because they also own and control the media. And the end result is the laws that we live under in this country strongly favor that class of people, and the workers are not getting a fair shake. And that includes more than 80% of Americans who, according to the statistics, cannot even make ends meet. They're living paycheck to paycheck.
Okay.
So that's a problem because our system of economics requires consumption in order to keep going. In other words, you have to pay the workers enough so they can buy the products they're producing. And we're getting to the point where that's no longer happening. We're already at the same point where we were at in 2008 prior to the crash, and we are very rapidly moving to conditions that are very similar to 1929. So what's going to happen is we're about to go into not just a recession, but possibly a full-blown economic crash in this country that we have not seen since the 1930s. And if that happens, Katie, bar the door, we're all in trouble. Because I don't know how that ends.
Okay. Well, I mean, you would need a major environmental problem if you're going to compare the 29 crash.
Well, I'm sure we have plenty of environmental problems.
No, I'm saying the Dust Bowl contributed more to the depression than the economic fall.
And do we not have chronic drought here in California?
No, but I'm saying it was the Dust Bowl.
And those conditions could be repeated.
Possibly, but it was not just an economic. Everybody points to the Great Depression and say, look at what economics did. No, the economic hit, but it was the Dust Bowl that kept it. It was that unprecedented environmental. It was a perfect storm of stuff, but it's a great thing to point at for people who say it's all about economics. Look what happened with the economics. It was not just about the economics. So that's an unfair to say it's going to be just like the Great Depression. There were two major factors of the Great Depression. You're only talking about one of them, and you're trying to say that one is going to cause the same thing that those two did. I think that's disingenuous.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean,
you were making the comparison.
I do not want to roll the dice that you are correct. I don't want to roll the dice on that. Just to have one of those conditions.
Here's what I don't want to roll the dice
2008.
Here's what I don't want to roll the dice
bad.
on. I don't want to roll the dice on allowing anyone the power to say this is how much you can make. That's what I believe is the root of this. That's why I believe this discussion comes down to there are people who say there are people who make too much money. That there should be a limit on how much money you can make. Okay. And I don't believe in that at all.
So are you okay with a return to feudalism?
I'm okay with not allowing anybody to make an arbitrary line that says this is how much money you can make.
Okay, so if we follow this to its natural conclusion, right? If the wealthy continue to do what they've been getting away with so far, which is tilt the playing field in their favor so that all of the gains, all of the wealth comes to them. Eventually, your share is going to continue to do what it's been doing since the 70s, which is shrink, down to what, nothing? And then what are you now, a serf? You're not even a peasant, now you're a serf.
And yet, I don't understand where that's coming from because I don't see that happening.
Because, well, you have to watch the news. You have to look at the statistics. You have to look at all of these reports that are coming out that are saying that income inequality is absolutely off the charts. And
as it always has been.
No, it has not always been this way. It's getting worse. And there are many, I mean, I can post graph after graph that illustrates this for you. So how far do we let this go? How far do we let it go? Because theoretically, if we don't put the brakes on what the 1% is doing, because right now they have over half, again, this report presented to the House of Commons in the UK, by 2030, the richest 1% will own 2/3 of the global wealth. When do we stop? When they hit 3/4? When they hit 90%, 99, 100?
Can it get there?
Well, theoretically, I suppose. I can't imagine it not having some hiccups and bumps along the way, but ultimately we could return to a feudal society where the king and the lord of the manor owns everything.
Again,
and
you're referring to a time when that was the law, that those classes were established by law.
Right? And why?
That's not what's happening.
What prevents us from returning to that?
There are, at least in the United States, there are no laws that this is the law. This is a class of a person established by law that you cannot become or be near this class of people. That doesn't exist.
Well,
the law
just
doesn't
150
exist.
years ago, we had a law that people could own other human beings.
And we no longer have that law.
We don't, but we could go back. We can backslide. And that's what I'm saying. It seems unthinkable and unimaginable right now where we're at, because we've grown up in a free society, a capitalist society, a society of milk and honey, comparatively speaking.
Yeah.
But we
Still
can backslide. And you have to figure we are on the cusp of runaway global warming and other environmental crises. We have issues with what they say are overpopulation. Malthusian collapse is a possibility. Societies do collapse. They do fall. And we've seen it. In fact, no civilization, no society on planet Earth has ever steadily ascended upwards without at some point experiencing a collapse.
And yet you're saying that this one will.
Our society will collapse.
No, you're
guarantee it.
saying that these 1%, they won't collapse. You're saying that there's going to be a society of 1% who will never collapse.
I honestly don't know what's going to happen. They could get the guillotine French Revolution style. We could redistribute the wealth, and anything could happen. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but from what I see off in the distance, I don't like it. I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Capitalism can't thrive if workers don't have income to buy the things they produce.
And I'm just not comfortable with the idea of anybody being able to say to anyone, this is as much as you can make.
Would you be comfortable with saying you can get as rich as you like? Because here's the cool thing about economics, right? It's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Your slice of the pie gets bigger doesn't always mean that my slice of the pie gets smaller.
That seems to be the point that you're constantly making, though.
Well, no, I want to be clear about this, which is why I'm bringing this up. This is a point that, in your favor, that, hey, the pie can get larger. Although the environmental issues and Malthusian collapse and all these other pressures, it tells us that the pie might be just about at peak size, or it might not get too much bigger before it starts shrinking again. The bottom line is this, though. I have no problem with a person having a larger slice of the pie as long as all the people at the bottom have enough. They have to have at least enough. And what is enough to me?
Yeah, what is enough?
Now, to me, enough is housing, food, clothing, clean water, healthcare, education.
Why stop there? Free internet. Why not a car?
Hey, those are great ideas.
What about what about a free supply of food for the rest of their lives? Well, I mean, why stop there?
I already said food.
But I'm saying they don't have to pay for it. It's just be supplied to them. How big of a house? How nice of a car? How fast of internet? Where do you draw the line? You're saying this is enough. Who do you think you are to say that's enough? What if somebody needs more?
Well, then they should have it.
Okay, so why not? Everybody should be able to go to Harvard. You are arbitrarily making a line that fits your beliefs. You're making a line that fits where you live, because you see yourself as normal, and you're saying this should be the line. I'm going to arbitrarily say this line because that's where I'm at. That should be the line. And I'm telling you, that's an arbitrary line. Who is anybody to say this is the line for you? Who's
line-
anybody to say, who do you think you are to say this should be the line, either up or down, for anybody? How dare you say that you should have this much and somebody be, but I want more? Who are you to say they can't, that they don't deserve more?
Well,
who
again,
are you?
I'm going to say something that I've said many times in the past and probably also on this show. There should be a floor beneath which nobody falls.
Right,
there should be a floor.
But
period.
who's defining that floor? That's what I'm talking about. It's
not
just
de-
an
it's
arbitrary
not
line.
defined yet. And
it's
yes,
just an arbitrary line.
It is.
And once we
largely-
give somebody the power to make an arbitrary line, then they have the power to move it wherever they want.
Okay, so
Well, I'm against making it a law. I'm against making it a law to draw a line. That's what I'm against. Because once you give somebody the power to make a law, you're talking about
the line can't exist if it's not enforceable.
We don't need. I don't believe in the line.
Okay,
And I especially don't believe in defining the line in law. Giving the power of a government to say this is a line, now that government has the power to move that line wherever they want, and it is law over everyone. And I don't like that. I don't want that. I don't want them to be able to say this is a line of what you are allowed to earn. Positive or negative, this is the line that we're going to define, because now they can move that line anywhere they want, and the power to make that line has been established to that
Well,
government.
I'm not talking about an upper limit so much as I'm talking about a lower limit.
Right, but it's going to be
This
the same
is a
thing.
floor beneath which we are not going to let anyone fall. So here's a question for you, Scott.
Yep.
Do you believe that all humans have dignity?
I believe you have self-dignity.
Do people have dignity by virtue of being human? By being born. You're born, you get a certain modicum of dignity that is irrevocable by virtue of your humanity. You're a human who's born, you get a minimum of dignity.
I absolutely believe that as a human, born or unborn,
Fair enough.
born or unborn, has a right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit. Has the right to obtain those things, has a right to live that way, has a right to not be stopped by any other power to not obtain those things.
Okay. Do you believe that a child has a right to food and clean water?
I believe that.
Does a child have a right to health care or education?
Does a child have a right to health care? I cannot say that I agree with that. I believe that a child cannot be denied because of whatever condition, but I cannot ever say that someone has a right to someone else's labor, because health care is someone else's labor. I don't have a right for you to take care of me. I don't have a right to force you to provide something for me.
But yet owners apparently have a right to 99% of all people's labor in the status quo.
Nope, that's again, you are attributing
Okay.
you're attributing a circumstance and saying, well, apparently it's just like a right. No, I'm saying by law a right established. That, again, I'm talking literal rights, literal laws, literal things, not figurative things like you keep referring to. You keep referring to, well, it's just like this.
Well, we're
it's
discussing ideas today,
effectively
Scott.
this.
We're not making laws today. We're discussing ideas.
Right, but what I'm saying is it's easy for you to stand on your argument by saying figuratively, it's figuratively this, and make the point. And you say right now it's figuratively this, and you make an analogy to when it was actually that. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to say this is what we're living in, when that's not true. That's not true. That is there. We do not have a system here that the law says you cannot be this.
Okay, so would you guarantee a person food? Would you guarantee a child food?
I would not let the government say I will provide food for a child.
So if that stance meant that children are going to starve to death or be sick or what have you, you understand that's the implication of that stance.
No,
that's the consequence of it.
The consequence, yes.
Okay.
That's the consequence of that stance. That's why we as people, not the government, we as people need to help others. That's what makes it a
Well,
virtue. That's what makes it a
people should be
principle.
the government, should they not? Should not the people be the government?
Right, but individuals is what I'm talking about. Individuals should take care of others. As soon as you make
When
it a
have
law,
individuals ever rose to that standard?
that's what we have to strive for. They don't have to when the government does it.
But they've never done it in human history ever.
Yes,
ever.
it has. It's not happened. Hasn't maintained.
Where? Oh, okay.
There we go. So you can't say it hasn't happened.
Okay. So where has it happened?
It happens in small areas.
Small areas.
Yep.
I want it to happen around the globe, and if it means it
Then
has
let's
to
be
happen
better people.
with the force of law, then I'm okay with that, because that
That will-
law means
And that will always
instead of
become
Jeff Bezos
power.
having $150 billion, he only gets 149.
So you agree
and
he has too
people-
much money.
Well, he has too much money, and I base that on the fact that the working conditions of his workers are literally abhorrent. And if that's the case, then yes, he has too much money. Now, if his workers were being paid living wages, if they had proper working conditions, then I would say it's okay for him to have $150 billion. I don't care so much that he has $150 billion if his workers are taken care of. It's not the dollar amount that troubles me. It's the conditions for the workers who are literally making him rich. All wealth is produced by labor. Therefore, labor is entitled to the lion's share of that wealth. I don't mind an entrepreneur capturing some of that. They have to be paid the value for what they do. But in the status quo, they are overvalued. And the reason they are overvalued is because we have managed to tilt the playing field. The laws in this country have been tilted to favor that particular class over the interests of the other. Unions are essentially etherized. They're done for in this country. We don't have proper unionization. We don't have proper collective bargaining in this country taking place. And the end result is workers are being forced to make do with less and less a share of their own labor, while people at the top, like Jeff Bezos, are hoovering up an ever greater share.
Okay.
So I don't mind you making $150 billion if you take care of your workers.
Oh, we're so thankful that you don't mind that. Thanks.
Well,
it's
that has to
attitude.
be the standard.
But I'm saying it's that attitude of, I don't mind you making that much money.
The people have a right to have that attitude. If all the workers in the world actually united and banded together, we would see that Jeff Bezos needs his workers far more than the workers need Jeff Bezos. The power lies with the people performing the labor. They are the ones creating the wealth. It's not the entrepreneur that's creating the wealth. The entrepreneur creates conditions, but there's nothing that prevents workers themselves from being their own entrepreneurs.
Then why don't
either.
they?
That's what they should be. I think they should be. I think businesses should be collectivized. So unless you are an owner who is out there doing the work that your workers do, or unless your workers, the workers can
the business doesn't
board
exist
so
without the entrepreneur or the owner.
There's no
it
reason
doesn't exist.
why the workers should be the owners and the entrepreneurs.
But they're not.
And they're not.
They can't
but they
be.
could be. Yes, they can be. Absolutely. Why can't they be?
I'm saying not everyone is going to be able to do it.
You're right. And that's why workers should elect amongst themselves people who can.
Who's going to start the business? You need someone to start the business for there to be workers at all.
So you compensate that person, they get paid, and that's it. And then it goes to the workers. The workers
then why even be the entrepreneur?
The business.
Why be the entrepreneur
because
if it's going to
make a lot of money?
If it's going to be taken away from you, if the control and everything that you invested in this, I'm going to and I know that when I get to this point, I can only get to this point, and once I get to this point, it's going to be taken away from me.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, that's right. That's
because
right.
the workers are performing all of the labor.
So what?
Okay, well, that's what we're going to get unless you find a way to balance this. Unless you find a way to balance the wages of the worker with the compensation of the owner, then we are going to end up in a society where businesses are collectivized.
See, Josh just said that right there. Yeah, they sometimes do become, as Doug was one of them, this is the person we were talking about. Yes, they can, they do, they become this, but the idea that says, once you become this, now we're going to take it away from you and give it to everybody else, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. When that person, if they wanted to, could do their own. And that person, if they want to, could do their own.
Then this person at the top needs to take care of the workers. I am totally okay with busting out the pitchforks and eating Jeff Bezos for lunch. I am 100% okay with that because he has shown not one shred of mercy or dignity to his workers, he's got it coming. Now, if you were a person who took care of your workers and ensured that they had living wages and proper working conditions, I don't mind you getting filthy rich. I don't even see a reason to collectivize that industry or that business. But if you are going to abuse the people who are making you rich, I'm going to eat you for lunch. That's my position.
So Josh says, if the line put everyone at 100,000, wouldn't the economy realign itself along those lines of that value? I keep saying, well, why 100,000? Who gets to say what that number is? The fact that anybody is arrogant enough to think that they know that they can set that line scares me.
Well, we have to decide what counts as the basics of a decent living. You know, I mean, how big of a house? That's a legitimate question that you ask. I really do think that's a very legitimate. How big a house? How much food? How much wages? How do you get a car or not? Do you get a bus, a bike? What do you get? These are very legitimate questions. Not everybody's going to get a Harvard education.
But I believe
ever.
that those are questions that you don't have a right to be asking. In the same way that you would say, in the same way, why do you need this gun? You don't have a right to ask me that.
No, we do have a right to ask questions. Absolutely, we have. I even have a right to ask you, why do you need that gun? And you have a right to say, I don't have to answer you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's not a good enough answer for you. You want to force an answer. You want, in this particular situation, you want to force an answer.
I
think
we do need to answer the question if we want. I think if we're going to live in a world where all humans have a guaranteed floor beneath which they don't fall, we have to answer that question. And I think that is the only world that assures us of human dignity. Right now, human dignity is not being respected. And it's crazy to hear an atheist,
mostly
I suppose,
by governments.
Okay.
Mostly by the power of governments that are too powerful.
And I agree with you. And the problem is the governments are not responding to the voice of the people anymore. They are responding to the people at the top 1%, which is why this problem is so serious. If the government were the people, then I wouldn't have such a problem with the government, nor do I think you would either.
Well, again, it always comes back to the same thing of giving government less power, giving government politicians, especially individuals in government, less power. That this continues to come back to the very basic. Again, we're going to come back to the very basic things. The one thing that would change everything in politics right now would be term limits. The one thing.
Sure.
You cannot buy.
Term limits would help. I don't know if it would be the cure-all, but it would help.
It would be the one biggest thing that you could do. More than anything else you could do is term limits on politicians.
Get the money out. You got to get the money.
Either
out.
way, the money doesn't matter, because when that person is termed out, they can't stay there to make the money investment worthwhile. How much money are you going to be able to invest in that politician when they're gone in 4 years? How much money? How much can you really get out of that politician?
Well, there'd be a price established by the market for bribing a politician, and people would still pay that price.
But it would still be less. There'd be that much less power that could happen.
I do agree that term limits need to be implemented, but I don't think that's the only reform.
But I think that's the first thing we should do, instead of just saying this is how you're only allowed to make. You're only allowed to make this. That's going to the point of, you making too much money is not the first step.
I'm not going to say anyone is ever making too much money unless their workers are not being compensated. And the problem is we don't live in a society where workers can any longer fairly negotiate their compensation. Again, we don't have unions. We don't have strong collective bargaining anymore. We used to in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when we saw unions rise essentially and take care of a lot of people, and even non-union workers benefited from the work that unions did.
As much as this is going to sound bad, as much as I dislike the idea of, not the idea of unions, but as much as I dislike the practices of unions, I could be swayed to say, yes, let's make them more powerful. I think I could be swayed to do that before saying this is going to be a bare. I would agree to that before I would say we're going to establish a bare minimum living wage or a maximum living wage. I would say, okay, let's give a little more power to the workers and let that market work itself out, instead of saying Now we're just going to arbitrarily draw a line and say, this is how much money people have to make, because all you're going to do is just reset poverty to that line.
Welcome to the revolution, comrade.
Right. I'm willing to
you
make
agree
that.
There's an imbalance.
I believe there's an imbalance. I do not agree in the idea that we need to make laws that draw arbitrary lines that then corrupt government officials can then have the power to move those lines.
I need the Soviet national anthem to start playing in the background. Comrade.
I've seen the, I could probably almost sing it because I've seen the movie Hunt for Red October so many times when they start singing, I'll totally butcher the Russian,
Right.
So if there's anybody out there who actually understands Russian, you're like, you're butchering it. I know, that's why I'm not, but I that one scene where they're all singing in the sub and, I grew up on that movie and it just kind of gets in your head.
I'm not going to change from my personal advocacy for a floor for all people. Because to me, in order to live in a world that has things like human rights and dignity, you have to have such a floor. I don't think the floor is as expensive or insane as people would assume it would be, but I don't know where to arbitrarily draw that line. And I will also say it's an arbitrary line. And I understand you're not comfortable with it. Yeah. You don't like it at all.
But at the same time, I don't know that you recognize where you are on that line.
Well, I'm certainly above that line.
But
I am above it.
Yeah, but it's, again, you're standing in this place up here, screaming at how unfair it is that they're up there, while you are so much above most of the world.
Oh, I got to tell you, Scott, you and I have more in common with homeless people than we do billionaires. We are much closer to the streets than you think. And I'm afraid that in the next few years, we might see this firsthand.
You haven't been around the world, have you? You haven't been to India,
but it doesn't.
have you?
But do you realize
You
how
haven't been
big
to
a
Africa,
billion
have
is?
you?
Do you realize how big a billion is?
Oh yeah, I've measured it out.
You've
I've
been
dealt,
to Africa.
I've
but
dealt
have
with
you
paper.
Been, have you been to?
No. Get this. I've dealt with paper. I worked at a print shop. I know how thick paper is, and I know 500 sheets of paper is about that thick.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a slightly thicker paper like money, 500 sheets is about that. I did the math.
Mm-hmm.
A trillion? Is it a trillion? No, $1 billion is a single stack of $100 bills, 90 miles tall.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, which end of that are you closer to? Are you closer to the bottom or are you closer to the top?
Oh, way closer to the bottom.
Okay, that's all I'm saying, Scott. I think we both agree that we want more fairness in the system and that we are okay with workers negotiating rather than having something imposed simply by law, which is how they do it in Germany. Because in Germany, they don't have a minimum wage law, but they do have collective bargaining agreements. And by law, those agreements have to be enforced.
I've just been on the other side of union work, and I hate it.
No, I get it, because
I've been on the other
unions
side.
aren't perfect either, and there's been corruption in the past in unions.
The majority of what I see from unions is non-productivity.
Right, and then when you have unions donating money to political causes that don't seem to be related to what they're doing. For example, when the Teachers Association is donating to Planned Parenthood, I have a problem with it, even though I'm not on the same side of that issue as you are. I have an issue with that.
Yeah.
Now, we can get into the whole women's rights and all that other stuff, but
we will at some point, I'm sure.
And we certainly will. But at the same time, I have an issue with the union donating the membership's money to something that doesn't necessarily seem to benefit or be in the interest of all the members.
So I would say you have swayed me more towards unions than I ever thought that I would be.
I think if a union operates in good faith, and again, when we talk about government and when you talk about unions and stuff, we're assuming a good faith endeavor.
And Josh makes a good point here. American unions are uniquely problematic. That's my only experience.
Yes.
So maybe unions in Europe are working better. I see what I see.
But I'm okay with the workers negotiating with the owners.
Yeah.
Now, granted, my more socialist and communist friends aren't going to like to hear me saying this because, they are going to eat all the rich. But I'm okay with negotiating something, but there has to be more balance. Right now, labor, all of the wealth that it's producing is being hoovered up at the top, and the people who work, you now have 80% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, and that is unacceptable, and it's going to lead to a calamity when most of us reach retirement age.
I am curious.
Have no retirement.
I am curious. Josh is watching us. I am curious, Josh, if the person you and I both know Do you think he earned a Lamborghini?
And it's possible. You can earn a Lamborghini.
I'm curious about that.
I'm okay with a world where some people have Lamborghinis and the rest of us don't. I'm okay with that. But you've got to take care of your workers along the way. I want to see all boats rise with the tide.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see many left behind and one just off to the moon. You
Right.
know?
Cool. Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that because, again, I feel like I don't ever want anybody to tell me this is the limit that I'm going to let you go.
Mm-hmm.
And since I don't want anyone to tell me that, my honor and my integrity demands that I don't ever make that request of someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this discussion felt like it was going, which is the ultimate goal, which is you make too much money and we're not going to let you have this much anymore because that's just too much. And I'm like, I don't ever want anybody telling that to me. So I will never tell that to someone else. Mm-hmm. And that's where it all comes down to is the idea of as soon as you give anybody the power to define the line, then they have the power to move the line wherever they want.
Sure.
And that's too much power.
Well, and I've got to come back and tell you that regardless of the size of government, the power is always going to be present. It's always going to be there. And there will be people, whether it is the government or society as a whole or an individual monarch, who will be able to use or abuse that power in some fashion. Which
I
is
just
why we as a
want
people have to
less of that
always be
power
vigilant.
written in law. I want less of that power written in law.
Sure.
Because it's going to be easier to fight, and once it's written in law, that's much harder to fight.
Right. Well, anyway, I think we've come to a little bit better understanding of one another, which is what's really cool about this podcast is it literally forces us for 45 minutes to sit down and hash out some of these differences that we have. And over the course of that discussion, we kind of get a greater appreciation for the other side.
Yeah.
Which is why I want to encourage you folks out there to share this podcast with people.
Yes.
And to sit down and have your own conversations with other people and kind of stick it out. You do have to go in with some ground rules that when the lights go off or when the discussion is over, you're still going to be friends.
Yeah.
You know,
Which I don't believe has ever ended here.
What?
Friendship.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. So, yeah, you do have to go in. You have to have a certain level of maturity. You have to have some presence of mind. But I want to encourage everybody to cultivate that and to sit down and have those difficult conversations with people about these big ideas, because that's when the change starts to happen in a society. And if we continue to obsess over the weather and the sports scores and what's happening on reality TV, which, by the way, isn't, then we're not going to build a better society. So I want you to join me and Scott in trying to build a better society. I want to encourage you again, share the podcast and sit down and have conversations of your own.
And also, if you want to sponsor us, send us money. We are not below asking for money. For what? Just for being here for you, right? You pay other entertainers. You could pay us. Now, if you want to sponsor the show, you can find that information on kerncast.com. You can catch us every Sunday night at 5 o'clock. Kerncast.com, Facebook Kerncast, and also Facebook A Valid Answer. We repost those. And then you can also find our podcast on iTunes and rate us on iTunes. And that way more people can find those. Yes, Josh, we're still friends, and I appreciate that you would fight that limit on my freedom as well. Thank you for participating in our discussion today, Josh. We want to encourage everybody, jump on there, discuss this, continue discussing it even when we go on offline. But hey, when we're on the show, 5 o'clock on Sundays, man, get on there, start asking us questions. We try to keep our show to around 45 minutes or so, because it kind of but I mean, sometimes if it goes, it goes. I don't know. So the more people, the more participation, who knows what's going to become of this. But Marshall, thank you for still being my friend.
Thank you for still being my friend.
I'm sorry if it looked like I was really pissed off. I'll try not to be that way online anymore. So yeah, that's the pastor apologizing for being mean.
But I appreciate the conversation that we had. You know, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep, that's in Proverbs.
So yeah, that's right. So it was good, and it made me think about my ideas. It made me think about my original post and refine my kind of thoughts and positions, because I'm still developing as a human being. You know?
Yeah, I just got to stop using those memes.
I can change my mind, and I can, I can learn and grow, and I'm growing and learning a lot as we go along.
good. You see, so I commented on that, but I didn't get to Scott on somebody else. They said, Scott, why are you so mean to Marshall if you call yourself a friend? And I'm like, I'm challenging him when I feel he's wrong. And that's making him a better person. What I didn't put on there and what I felt was the obvious other side of that is that at the same time, he's challenging when he thinks I'm wrong and I'm better because of his friendship. So I didn't actually post that. I felt it was implied, but I didn't post that. But that's the truth. That's what we're doing. That's why we go on there and say, hey, why are you doing this?
Outstanding.
All right. Until next time, we'll catch you guys later. Bye.
Thank you.